World of Tanks Blitz is a very opinionated game, but that's good. You want a game where a lot of people have different opinions. Bobby McDooferson can have an opinion on the 268 version 4, and I'll have my own opinion, and all of you probably have slightly different opinions from everybody else as well, which is great. But one thing we all don't have different opinions and agreements on is the matchmaker. Depending on how it is fixed, a lot of people are going to have different voices on it, but I think we can all agree that the matchmaker sucks currently and it needs to be fixed. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about my personal way to fix the matchmaker, and I think that this really solves all the problems. Wargaming has previously said, if we change the matchmaker, there's going to be too long queue. Well, I have figured out how to fix the queue problem. I figured out how to fix the matchmaking problem of not being lined up with correct tanks. I think I figured out the whole shebang, so we're going to talk about in today's video. Now, on the note of will Wargaming ever fix the matchmaker, I don't think it will be anytime soon, or ever at that. We've seen updates come into the game previously, like the rework of Tier 9, rework of Tier 8, PBR tanks, Castilla's going to get a PBR rework, and even in Update 9.1, we're going to see a massive rework of Tier 10. And these updates take multiple months of effort. I mean, the fact that Wargaming is reworking almost all of Tier 10, and they have to balance each of these tanks, they probably have a lot of crew and staff working on this. So if they put a lot of time into that, which nobody asked for, then clearly the matchmaker, which everybody is asking for, is probably not going to be reworked ever, because I just don't think Wargaming cares. But we do, so I'm going to talk about it. Now, the first problem with the matchmaker is the problem I've always had with it: lineups. I know half the time when I load into a battle right at the beginning if it's going to be a loss or a victory, because you can see the tanks you have and the tanks the enemy team has and basically say, oh, well, we just lose. So let's look at the enemy team's tanks. They have a 60 TP, a Super Conqueror, and a T57 Heavy when it comes to heavies. We have a 60 TP and an E100. Yeah, that's right, we got 2 heavies, because we have 3 tank destroyers. I don't understand why one team gets 3 tank destroyers and one team gets 2. Now yes, technically the 268 version 4 is basically a heavy, but the matchmaker does not decide based on what type of tank destroyer you're driving. So if I was running a double Grill 15 in platoon, it would have put me in the same matchup and probably put me against the same team, which is kind of dumb. So the first thing that the matchmaker needs to do is it needs to put, in my opinion, the same type of vehicles on both teams. And even light tanks, people don't realize how much of an influence lights have over mediums, but it's a pretty big difference. So Wargaming needs to make it so that if you're running a light, you play a light at the same tier as well. You can't say, oh look, this is a tier 9 medium that Bob's running, let's give the enemy team a tier 10 medium. No, that doesn't work, that's just a loss. How many times have you played on Falls Creek and been in a tier 9 medium, and the enemy team gets 2 tier 10 mediums, and you basically say, well, I'm useless, that's the end of my battle. I mean, that happens so many times. So the matchmaker needs to, first of all, make sure that if one team is running a tank destroyer, the other team is running a tank destroyer, the same tier. A medium, a heavy, they have to be the same tier, and that's the first part. Now, the part about Wargaming says, well, that would make the matchmaker queues longer. Here's my solution to that. If you want to make the matchmaker shorter, merge the EU and NA server. We speak the same language, and they can even merge the Asia server, yes, but server for all I care. Let's say your ping went up to 100 on average. I still think that would be fine. I would much rather deal with 100 ping on average if the matchmaker was fine and I was able to actually enjoy most of the games I loaded into. I mean, 100 ping is fine. I've played on RU, that's 200 ping. It's much more than workable. And if Wargaming made a solution where they could make the ping pretty good overall, then it would be way, way better. So that's something that I think would be a fantastic fix, is just merging the servers. Obviously the RU server is already large enough that they don't need to merge it, but for NA, EU, and Asia, they could easily merge all 3 of the servers, and there you go. Now you have an easy fix to having people loading into more battles faster when it comes to the matchmaker. Now, other fixes to the matchmaker that definitely need to be made. Tank classification. The 268 version 4 is not the same type of tank as a Grill 15. Therefore, a 268 version 4 should not be matched up against a Grill. It should be matched up against either a V4, a Jagdpanzer, a Tu-110E3, a Badger, any type of heavily armored tank destroyer. And that's the same case for heavies. A Super Conch should not be fighting an E100, and an E100 should not be going up against a Concept 1B. They are incredibly different different playstyles that push to different sides of the map. One team, if they're running a super heavy, the other team should get a super heavy. I think that's pretty common sense because it drastically affects where each team goes and can greatly affect how the battle outcomes are. So that's another thing I definitely think should happen, is that super heavies and tank classifications. Like, let's say one team's running an E50M. You can't give one team an E50M and the other team a Boschation 25 ton. I mean, they just don't match. So I think that the matchmaker should also classify specific types of mediums, heavy tanks, and tank destroyers, so that way, when you're playing one type of tank, the other team also gets the balanced one. Now, I don't know why this is an argument I've heard from people, but apparently if you make the matchmaker quote-unquote balanced and fair for both teams, that would make the game boring. No, it definitely wouldn't. If I'm in a 60 TP and I'm fighting another 60 or an IS-7 or an IS-4, it's not going to change how fun the game is. In fact, it would be much more fun to know that when you're loading into your battle, you actually have an equal chance of winning it, down to the fact that the enemy team has a very similar lineup to you do. Now, the final change to the matchmaker is the one that I had a very long time troubled with, because the current problem with the matchmaker is definitely by far the player base. There are a lot of bad players out there, and you know your own skill level. I'm not picking on players being bad. It's fine to be bad at this game, but it really hurts when you're a very good player at this game and Wargaming shoves 5 of those players on your team and gives the enemy team multiple better players, in reality making your chances of winning much, much worse. So the ultimate fix I've come up with is a sort of skill-based matchmaker. Skill-based matchmaking, in theory, doesn't work, because if you put 40%ers against 40%ers, they will, in theory, become 50%ers. But here's my solution to it. So what Wargaming is going to do is they're only going to look at Tier 9 and Tier 10 statistics. And if you're going 45% or less in Tier 9 or 10, it's going to put you into a separate matchmaker. Now remember, the servers are combined, the NA and EU at this point, so that means there's enough people to go around. So when they do this, what ends up happening is these players are fighting now 45% and worse players. But the only way to get out of that matchmaker is to go 60% against the other players. So that would mean that not only are you improving upon your win rate, but you're actually going higher. So why does this work? Well, if you're going 50% and it put you back in the normal matchmaker, then you're still a 40%er, you're just going even against other 40%ers. But if you're going 60% against 40%ers, that means that in theory you're a 50%er because of the 10% difference. So, if Wargaming made it so that you had to go 60% to get out of the 40% matchmaker, then in theory, when you fight in the normal matchmaker, you would be a 50%er, which is what everybody wants. So, I think that would be the ultimate solution. I think that that's really how you fix the matchmaker. So, these are very simple changes that, in theory, don't take that much effort. You have to classify each type of tank as a specific role, and then you have to classify a matchmaker that puts worse players into one spot and good players in the others. Now, here's what I do want to point out. There should not be a skill-based matchmaker for skilled players. Once you're above 50% and you understand how to play this game in Tier 10, you should have to fight better players. Good players should not be disqualified of their skill because you don't want to fight them. That's a pretty simple fact. Just because I'm good at the game and I've learned how to play it doesn't mean that I should be punished for your stupidity. And that's one thing I've said multiple times. So the people out there that think skilled players should only fight other skilled players, you're wrong. And that's just selfish. I'm going to be real. Because if you're skilled, you have earned your skill. You can't buy skill in this game. As much as people try to argue broken tanks make you more skilled, they don't. In Tier 10, it is most of the time down to your skill level. And yeah, that's as simple as it is. So there should not be a skill-based matchmaker for any skilled players. It simply should be for the bad players so they understand how to play the game and they don't taint a lot of players' fun that do actually try to understand and learn how the game works. Either way, those are my changes I would make to the matchmaker. There's quite a few, but I think that those are the possible solutions. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, but hopefully you enjoyed today's video, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye-bye.